I was asked by Belle Wong, one of my ex-colleagues from UOB from years ago, on how to sketch tree. So I give my thoughts right here in this video. Let's go. Well, let's talk about trees. In this case, if you look at the shadow on the ground, that defines the three-dimensional form of this tree. Just don't draw little leaves, like the tiny little leaves, but look at the overall three-dimensional shape of the tree. In other words, don't get too carried away with all the tiny details of the leaves. And then look at this series of trees here. What's important is that to look at the contrast between the trunk and the background. Some of the trunks are lighter than the background. Some of the trunks are darker than the background. Actually, it's the contrast that you're after and not so much the specific color or so on. The contrast of value is way more important, and that's what you need to observe when you look at trees. One thing in common about trees though, they are full of holes. Oftentimes beginners just draw a three-dimensional shape and color green all right through where the leaves are and leave no hole. But if you look at all the trees, there are holes everywhere, and that's really one of the things that you need to do for trees. Leave it lots of hole, let it breathe. In this case, you can see that the trees are all different shapes. They are not the same at all. Even when it's the same species, you see that the shape and the overall structure of the trees are completely different. So it's very important to stay irregular with the trees. Oftentimes beginners just take one shape and repeat it all around, and that's kind of like the rookie mistake, if you like, with trees. One more thing about green. Well, if you're going to sketch tree, you obviously need to handle green. And in a green space like this, you will see green and you see brown, and a mixture of the two colors, the in-between colors of those two. But the complexity of green is a difficult one. I have a video on green. You can take a look at that video. I'll put the link right up here. The other thing to consider about trees are shapes. If you look at the shapes, these are very obvious palm-like. Well, although they are not palm, they are more like banana trees, but they certainly will give an impression of what trees, that the shapes belong to trees, tree shape, right? It's the same with the distance, where you can see almost like coconut or that sort of palm tree, coconut tree, that sort of structure, and that's something that will instantly give your audience some semblance of trees, well, especially in tropical area like Singapore. Of course, the shape of a coconut tree is hard to miss, so keep that in mind. One more thing about trees is how do you terminate at the bottom part of the trees, where you can see, usually for beginners, when they just draw down, it's just straight down to the ground. I would like to point out that most trees has lots of grass at the bottom, and that's what helps soften the blow, if you like, from the trunk to go all the way down to the ground. And that's what you can do with your drawing of trees as well. Basically terminate the trees with grass or indication of grass. Well, many people like to sketch tree because they like to sketch the tree barks. If you notice the texture of the tree bark up close. So if you're going to sketch tree up close, you have to be conscious of the texturing of the tree barks. If you're going to sketch it from a distance, then not so much. Okay, one note about shadows of trees. If you notice where the shadows are, they are like little three-dimensional shape within the trees. And underneath the bunch of leaf, you can also see it's shadowed at the high part of the trunk, and then it's lit up at the bottom of the trunk. This tree is another good example where you can see the shadow, especially the part where just underneath the bunch of leaf, you see the trunk is in shadow. It's also important to note when there's harsh or harsher sunlight, the shadows are a little bit more defined compared to when the sun is a little bit more overcast. When the cloud's over and it is less direct, you can see the shadow edges will be softer and diffused. And you can see now when the sun has gone away or clouded or under the cloud influence of cloud ahead, you can see the shadows are very diffused and the edges are completely sort of blurred out. That's something to note when you are sketching under different sunlight condition, specifically for tree, but also true for most other objects. You can also note that the lit part or the sunlit part of the trees are of course a little bit more spring green with a harsh sunlight or more direct sunlight. Sometimes when you look at trees, the lights are coming from the side, so you will see half the trunk in the shadow and the other half in the light. It's quite a common sunlit phenomenon for trees, so you gotta watch out for that as well. If you notice the direction of the shadows on the ground, you will see that they are actually going one direction, and that will give you an indication of how the terrain of the floor or the ground is, and that gives you an opportunity to define three-dimensional space for your ground. This tree will be a good example for sunlight shadow, except that the trunk is completely in the shadow. Whereas if you move somewhere to the right hand side, you can see there are actually the trunk here, where the bottom half of the trunk is in the sunlight. So again, something to watch out for. It allows you to define the three-dimensional sense of the tree as well. Layering of trees is another great way of creating distance between this tree and the tree behind. So I can see the tree in front is lit up, and so the top of the tree is in sunlight against the backdrop of a tree which is darker. So that allows you to have two layers, and that allows it to pop, if you like. The tree in front can be made via a negative shape of the darker shape at the back of the tree in front. One more thing about tree shadow is that you see how it links all the way down to the ground. You really can't separate between the actual part of the shadow of the tree and the shadow on the ground. They are actually one piece. If you like, they are one, basically one shape in total. So basically, when you sketch trees, you have to look at shapes, you look at shadows, you look at all kinds of observation on the conditions of the sunlight and so on and so forth. And it's actually a lot of fun to sketch trees, and it allows you to get out to be, in nature or in the green. So it's so have fun, enjoy sketching trees, and all the best. Stay safe.